All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, I am Andrew, aka Sauron Mindgasms, and I forgot to ask you what those Japanese characters mean, Dusty. We have Woke Centrist here, aka Dusty Cubes, aka Dustin Cubit, who I often do fantasy nerd chats with. And what do those Japanese characters mean, Dusty?
Ishtari.
Oh, Ishtari. Yes. We see that we see that in episode. So, of course, we are talking about Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, episode 6 to 8, which obviously includes the finale too. And we'll
Yeah,
talk about
so
whether
six, the big battle. Seven,
yeah,
the aftermath. And
yep,
eight, the finale.
yep, yeah, for sure. Very a lot of interesting stuff to talk about. Some stuff that kind of breaks the Tolkien lore. Some stuff that's interesting, like the creation of Mordor. Although, as we briefly talked about before, I thought the way that was done was kind of dumb. And basically, the identity of Sauron was revealed, which I thought was really cool and was probably my favorite part of the last three episodes, I would say. And I would say it seems pretty fucking obvious to me at this point, although maybe you disagree, that the stranger has been revealed to be Gandalf, one of the Ishtari, like you were talking about, and then the three Elven rings were created. So I guess let's try to do this roughly in chronological order. So I was telling you before that I wasn't really a big fan of episode 6. I did like the culmination of all of the different sets of characters basically going to battle with Adar's orcs and the creation of Mordor. Like I said, even though I didn't like the way it was done, I thought it was cool that that happened. But it seems like there was a lot of like girl powery stuff going on and more lore breaking stuff and all this stuff about the Mithril having the light of the Valar, so the elves have to get the dwarves to give them Mithril so they don't die. I thought was dumb. I was hoping it was going to be a red herring like we were talking about before, and it would turn out to be just the rise in the power of Sauron was what was causing one of the trees to be corrupted and the elves to worry about the light of the Valinor going out, so they would have to leave Middle Earth forever. But yeah, so what did you think of episode 6 in general, and what were some aspects that you liked and that you didn't like?
So episode six, I thought was okay. I didn't think it was bad. I did enjoy the big battle. Um, I know the timing seemed weird that the Numenorians kind of showed up to save the day, but
Yeah,
I
that was
thought
convenient.
yeah, but there were a lot of people that got killed before
Hmm.
the Numenorians showed up. I was like, whoa, they're in the last stand. And where
Yeah,
they got like a bunch of like old people and women inside of a little building. And the only real fighters there are like a couple men. You have Arondir. Bronwyn's like seemingly mortally wounded, severely wounded. And her son is there freaking out. And they break in and she is forced to make a decision. Of course, Arondir holds his ground, not giving up information because, you know, they always give you the bargain. Hey, tell us what we want and we'll let you live. Of course, you can never trust the bad guy because they're probably going to kill you anyway.
right.
The son falls for it and unveils the sword hilt. And I thought it was pretty cool. Like, I know you didn't like the way the sword hilt plot resolved, but I thought it was pretty inventive origin for Mordor, in my opinion. I
Hmm.
thought it was pretty inventive on their part because I was like, okay, they made this thing happen, and now the volcano blew up, and there's just like smoke and ash everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, we were
So,
talking, you and Tristram and I were talking about that a little bit in our chat group. And I was saying that it's cool that there's now a creation story for Mordor. I just thought that the way it was done was strange and didn't make sense to me because we were debating about whether when that old guy who it seems like is going to turn out to be one of the Nazgul or perhaps the Witch King of Angmar put that sort of shard from supposedly Sauron's sword probably into that it was that there was that kind of little piece of Arthurian legends where he put the sword in the stone and then he turned it and he set off all these mechanisms which caused a flood, and there was so much water that it caused the volcano to flood, which caused this volcanic eruption which led to the creation of Mordor. I thought, like, it seemed obvious to me that the show creators were literally trying to tell us that yes, if a flood of water is big enough, it can somehow cause a volcanic eruption, even though that should logically never happen because you would think that the water would get vaporized when it goes into the volcano because the volcano would be too hot. I mean, I'm not a volcano expert, but that seems kind of obvious. But we were debating about whether there's some sort of magic evolved in that happening, and I was saying it seemed to me like that mechanism set off a whole lot of other mechanisms. And like I said, we're supposed to believe that the water flooded the volcano and caused it to erupt. But Tristram, and I think maybe you two were saying that it seems like there was perhaps some magic involved, and that's how it happened. But I was saying that when we see magic used in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, it seems like they make it obvious, like uh, Gandalf says a spell, or his staff lights up, or we see Sting glow blue, and it seems like they make it obvious. So, what was it? Like, what was it about it that made you think? Like, did you think that it was magically aided, and that's why we're supposed to believe that water can cause a volcanic eruption? You there? You have yourself muted.
oh, sorry about that. Well, because I like to cook and I spend a lot of time in the kitchen, I was thinking about pressure cookers and how they work. So what you do is you fill a airtight receptacle and it heats up the water inside and creates immense pressure when heated up. And this isn't like using volcanic levels of heat. This is like conventional heat that you have in the kitchen. So just like putting a mass of water in there and heating it up in an instant, because this would be like a flash heating event, I think it would be plausible to create an explosion.
Oh, okay.
Because the water, like a flash, if water flashes to gas very quickly, it causes a rapid expansion. It's a rapid expansion and it can explode. That's so it made sense that the top blew off of the mountain for me.
Oh, okay.
Because if you heat a bunch of water very quickly so that it instantly turns into steam, that pressure needs somewhere to go. And if it doesn't, it's just going to burst whatever receptacle it's in.
Oh, okay. So maybe my assumptions about how that would work in terms of the physics are just wrong then. So,
Well, I don't think it's all explains everything. Like it could blow up the top of a mountain, but I don't know what it would do regarding, triggering an eruption.
yeah.
Like it can definitely
And
blow up the top of a mountain, but I'm not sure if it would cause like lava to spew out the top or anything like that.
yeah, cause a volcanic eruption. Okay. Yeah, and I mean also if you have a pressure cooker, then you're putting water in a container, but you're not pouring you're not pouring water onto lava, which is presumably already at a much higher temperature than the water that is going into the volcano. So, yeah, maybe that is the case, that it could still possibly blow off the top of a mountain, but not cause a volcanic eruption. So, do you think that we're supposed to believe that there was some sort of magic aid with that?
I don't think the writers are all that concerned about like the physics involved with creating an erupting volcano. Like, I think just realistically, like, how long has Mordor been spewing ash? Like, I don't even think realistically a volcano can spew like ash continuously for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah, yeah, I was thinking about that too. If the creation of Mordor was caused by a volcanic eruption, you wouldn't think that it would blot out the sky just endlessly so the orcs can live there because the sun has been blocked out by the ash.
Right. So I don't know. In order for it to have that much impact, because it's weird because one, it's localized within Mordor. However, it's still like a continuous stream of ash that only falls within a certain area.
Hmm.
And I've like read a little bit about like super volcanoes and stuff like that. And of course, we have some modern historical example like Mount St. Helens and things like that. But like Mount St. Helens, it blew its top off, almost very Mordor like, but it wasn't spewing ash for weeks and years on end like
Hmm.
Mordor does. So, you know, of course, there has to be some fantastical element that causes it to do that. But we got to remember Tolkien's world is full of soft magic.
Hmm.
So it's not like they really would need to explain the intricacies of how magic would sustain that.
Right. So you think that it was just some sort of inherent soft magic, but they're just not being as direct about it as Tolkien is with some of the characters in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit when they make some of the soft magic happen.
Well, I think so. Else, why would they need this crazy, like, magical, evil, cursed sword to initiate everything? Like, it seems like if magic need not be involved, that in order to start this process off, I don't think they'd need a weird magical cursed sword to do it. Because what they were doing seemed like it was a mechanical mechanism that they were operating. Like, so I don't know. It's because of that element of the cursed sword, it's possible that particular element had something to do with, you know, how Mordor was made. Like, why
Okay.
couldn't they just craft any old sword to fit the hole in there? So
Yeah.
there has to be some type of magical element that imbued the eruption or something like that. I think they don't need to go into details. This isn't a Sanderson book. You know, it's going to be super
Yeah. I'm
fantastical and
I'm not
soft
saying
magic
I'm not
devices.
saying it should be some kind of hard magic system with super specific rules. I was just thinking too though in terms of what this reminds me of another aspect of what we were discussing earlier, in that they should have made it more clear how this is happening. They could have just had someone say one line, or have some glowing light emanating from the water
Right.
indicating that it's supposed to be magic or something. They could have easily
Hmm.
done some little thing to indicate that it's magic. The fact that we have to speculate and debate about whether it was magic or not just seems like an error from the show creators to me. They should have been more clear about whether there's supposed to be magic involved, or whether we're just supposed to assume that it just kind of happened.
Well, yeah, I think that's true. They should have been more clear. with why that sword is particularly important to use to start this mechanism versus just like some old sword that someone could have just made to fit that hole, to fit that slot. So
Right.
yeah, I think it would have been nicer if they shown like, okay, you put the evil sword and like it's emanating power and it's imbuing power into these floodwaters and yada yada yada. But yeah, maybe it could be that they're just lazy and weren't really thinking about it. But even then, they had the budget to implement it, so I don't know why they didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Hmm. Well, another one aspect about episode 6 that I did like and is Adar, and I pretty much like everything that's happening with him in this season. And I was just thinking earlier too, after I watched episode 8, because I was telling you guys yesterday, I'm pretty much only excited for season 2 to see what's happening with Sauron, and we saw in episode 8 that that was revealed to be Halbrand. So I'm very interested to see what happens with him. And I said yesterday that's kind of the only aspect of season 2 that I'm looking forward to. But I forgot about Adar, so I'm interested to see what's happening with him too, because I'm wondering whether there's going to be some sort of evil civil war between him and Sauron, or whether they're going to ally. It's interesting that Adar was there for the creation of Mordor, and and Sauron was not. So that's interesting too. But oh yeah, another thing in terms of volcano too, which uh, I think I mentioned to you guys, was that it was kind of dumb to end the episode with the final shot being the volcanic eruption about to overtake Galadriel, because we know she's anyone who's even seen the Lord of the Rings movies, you don't have to have know anything else other than that, knows that she's going to survive for that, and for the Hobbit movies of course too. And and then in episode 7 we saw, oh, okay, she's somehow just okay, even though she was in the direct path of a volcanic eruption. Is it because she's like elf and elves are indestructible or something? I thought that was kind of weird.
Well, it looked like it was mostly just an ash cloud that was kind of like blowing everywhere.
Okay.
Because, yeah, it didn't look like a lava flow specifically. Because if there was a lava flow that went straight through the village, everybody would have died.
It looked to me like it was maybe some sort of ash cloud in front of a lava flow that was coming behind it, to me.
Yeah, but I know, like, in the aftermath, everything was on fire, but there was no lava anywhere. So I think it was just like ash and burning embers that were kind of flowing, and that's what caught things on fire was this burning ember ash cloud. That was that was the danger. Because if it was lava, they have no chance.
Yeah.
There's nothing they can do. They'd
Well,
all be dead.
it kind of seemed to me like they were really they were really trying to make it seem that way, like they had no chance. But then in the next episode, it seemed to me like everyone was magic. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people were magically okay. It seemed cataclysmic, but not to again, like not to a realistic degree to me. It seemed like it should have been more cataclysmic.
Mm, yeah, I know. When I saw that scene, uh, to me, it didn't look like lava. I wasn't expecting everyone to die, but because when they did start the next episode where everyone's covered in ash, that kind of made a lot of sense for me.
Okay. Hmm. Well, oh yeah, yeah. I mentioned Adar. So another aspect of that that I was just thinking about in relation to episode 8, where we see that Halbrand is Sauron, is that in episode 6 we see I forget whether it was in maybe episode 5 or episode 6 that Adar said that he killed Sauron. So then now that we know that Halbrand is Sauron, and when Adar has been captured after those epic battles in episode 6, he he sees Halbrand at one point because he stops Galadriel from killing Adar, and so that makes me think that maybe Adar did kill Sauron, but he got reincarnated in a different body or something like that, or he just thought he had killed. I guess that's the only thing that makes sense, because if he thought he had killed him but he survived, then he would have recognized Sauron as Halbrand when he saw him in that tent, unless he recognized him but pretended to not recognize him. But I feel like the makers of the show would have at least had some sort of brief facial expression of recognition if he recognized Halbrand as Sauron. That's interesting. I'm interesting to see what happens with that, and why in season 2 hopefully it'll reveal why Adar said that he killed Sauron.
Yeah, perhaps I'll get into that conflict in the next season, because it seems like, it does seem like Adar has some type of conflict with Sauron.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to see how that plays out. And I know
Yeah.
that Halbrand mentions to Adar that they've met before, and then Adar's like, "Yeah, I don't recognize."
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, that's interesting, because we
But
know.
remember they talked a little bit about Adar's origin story as well, about him being the first Uruk.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I
the
guess
first
he's
two.
kind of like the first daywalker, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And we know that he started off as an elf too, so he became corrupted and he's a dark elf, which fits with the Tolkien lore, as we mentioned before. And it's cool that he is the father or the creator of the orcs. And yeah, it's interesting that he became an Uruk after becoming a corrupted or dark elf, which is,
Hmm.
yeah, that's it. He's a really interesting character for sure. And
Yeah, so they're kind
yeah.
of trying to, I guess they're trying to spell out like the origins of the Uruk,
Hmm.
which weren't, I don't believe were covered really in any of the books.
Yeah, Sauron just created some in I think it was in two no, it was in Fellowship of the Ring, and we don't know how they came into existence in the first place. So yeah, that is cool. And yeah, like I said, even though I was kind of disappointed with some aspects of episode 6, all the cool battle sequences were really cool. And Galadriel doing all these awesome matrix moves to dive arrows and shit and go onto the side of her horse like she's a Mongol or something like that when she's facing the orcs who are firing arrows at her. And all the cool other epic battle stuff is cool in that episode too.
Yes. So yeah, this episode 6 was mainly just the convergence of the parties, right? So we got the convergence of the Numenorians and with the Southlanders.
Hmm.
So now they converged. I guess we do not have a convergence, and we're not seeing one this season with the Ishtari and the Harfoots.
Hmm.
But I don't
Yeah.
even remember if the Harfoots are present in this.
Uh, yeah, I'm pretty sure that they're not in episode 6. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I know the
So
next episode they kind of like banish Gandalf.
yeah, basically.
Because
Yeah,
I don't know,
another thing
because
I was
those crazy
telling
people show up and burn everything up.
yeah. Another thing I was mentioning in my own solo review of episode 6 was that I just this romance between Bronwyn and Adar just really does not work for me, and it seems like they're just awkward with each other, in that the actors seem awkward with each other. It doesn't seem like the characters are supposed to be awkward when when Bronwyn kisses Adar, I was saying it's like it seems so awkward. It's like she's bringing her first black guy home, and she's like, "Oh, I gotta be gradual with this."
When did Bronwyn kiss Adar?
That was the. I'm pretty sure it's in episode 6, before or after the epic battles, where it's the first time you see them kiss.
Well, why would she want to kiss Adar though? He's
No, oh
evil.
shit. I've been saying Adar, not Adar, Arondir. I don't know why I've been
Okay.
saying Adar. Yeah. No, she definitely wasn't kissing Adar. Yeah.
Maybe he's just awkward. He doesn't seem like the guy that has his emotions on this, wears his emotion on his sleeve.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't mind the awkwardness because not every romance goes smoothly.
That's true. It just seemed like to me, well, like I said, it seemed more like a bad acting job to me than it did that the characters are supposed to be awkward. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that's the way it seemed to me.
I don't know. To me, because that type of relationship is so forbidden, I don't see that they would be like super willing to show like romantic affection and stuff like to
Hmm.
me it seems that because it's not a sanctioned type of relationship, they'd pretty much tiptoe around it as much as possible.
Okay. Hmm. So,
But she gets shit at least by the townspeople in the first few episodes when there's the allegation there,
mhm.
and Theo, and they make bully Theo about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was hmm. So what did you think about that whole thing, which is a bit it's one of those other big lore breaking things where the Mithril has the light of the Valar, so it reveals this whole thing about why Gilgalad secretly sent Elrond to get some Mithril from Durin, and that was the secret purpose for why he sent Elrond to meet Durin, because the Mithril has the light of the Valar, and the tree in Linden is getting corrupted, so the light of the Valar will eventually go out unless they get some Mithril, so they don't have to leave Middle Earth forever. And there's nothing to the Mithril has absolutely nothing to do with that or the light of the Valar in the actual Tolkien lore. So, well, what did you think about that whole aspect?
Well, I remember that Mithril by the time of the Third Age is kind of mythical itself. Like, remember when Frodo gets the Mithril vest,
Mm-hmm.
and basically nobody knows how to make Mithril at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we're dealing with myths here, it's not completely, I can't say that it can be completely trusted. I almost feel that this myth might be a manipulation by Sauron for them to use this to create the rings. I almost feel like he's like a puppet master, and that's probably a place where he's pulling some strings.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that
So,
that's possible because we do see that in episode 8 too, right before after it's revealed that Halbrand is Sauron, we know that he's been manipulating Celebrimbor and giving him all of these tips about how to stretch Mithril out in order to make these magic rings, and he wants him to make those rings. So he could have somehow been manipulating them into doing that, but if that's the case, then how did he somehow influence Gilgalad to believe that about the Mithril?
you mean like the myth?
Yeah, about the Mithril containing the light of the Valar.
Um, well, if it's a myth, it's a myth. you know. It just means that it's passed down to some type of knowledge. But even if you
So
remember, like
you mean like
counterintelligence, just think of modern counterintelligence inserting lies to get a favorable outcome about something.
mhm.
Um, like, I think it's possible that there's some counterintelligence done by Sauron here regarding that myth.
You mean like a long time in the past, Sauron sort of somehow inserted some of the aspects of the mythology of Mithril, that it contains the light of the Valar a long time ago, and then after that had already happened, then Gilgalad heard about that as part of the mythology of Mithril.
Possibly. I don't know. I have to see how everything plays out. Because right now I try to hold judgment until we see what happens. Because I don't know, maybe they're gonna flip the script later on, and like it becomes that this whole thing was like a master plan of Sauron's or something.
That'd be interesting if they did that. I mean, I would definitely prefer that if it ends up basically being some sort of red herring. But it still just annoys me that they would tease a lore break that turns out to be a red herring, because it seems like, just strategically speaking, that would only serve to piss off the fans who know that there basically is no mythology of Mithril, having in that it contained the light of the Valar.
Well, if this was the case, just think about the implications of what this means. It means that all the elves would need to have some freaking mithril. And we
Hmm.
know in like the third age, mithril has become this mythical and extremely rare metal. Like it's not something that's everywhere.
Hmm.
And in order for this to be, oh, this is the thing that's going to save the elves, it would have to be everywhere, or at least in the possession of all the elves by the third age.
Yeah,
And we
and
know by the third
that
age
doesn't.
that they're still um, like the light of the elves is still dying. I don't think it has anything to do with Mithril like extending anything.
Yeah, and we said that it's not the case, or at least it certainly doesn't seem to be the case, that all elves just carry some mithril around with them in the
Yeah,
third
so that's
age.
why I'm questioning this as being a red herring. Because if we take a look at any of the stuff that happens in the future with Mithril, like the stuff is extremely rare. When it's found in right, they found the vest in Moria, right?
Hmm.
And they're like, "Oh, this is mithril. It's like super rare." You know, if it was the case that this stuff is going to save the elves and all the elves, you know, so I don't know. I don't know how they're going to explain it. So I don't think that the whole Light of the Valar thing, unless they completely change what happens in the future,
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's
that
possibly
worries
a red
me.
herring.
That worries me, and it annoys me too, because, like I said, it's either a massive lore break, or it's a red herring that teases at a massive lore break, which shouldn't be done either way, in my opinion. And we've seen other things that are, yeah, are basically lore breaks too, and there are a few examples, but one of them that we that happens in episode 7 that I mentioned is that it seems pretty clear to me that Galadriel is saying that Celeborn is dead, and it seems clear to me that, and again, I could be wrong about this because this is a prediction, but it seems to me like they're just not going to have Celeborn on the show, and it seems pretty clear to me that he's supposed to be dead, which is a huge lore break because we see him in the Fellowship of the Ring movie at least, and if you know any of the lore, you know that they they're supposed to be married at this point, and they eventually have some kids too. And I know we were debating about this a little bit yesterday, but but of course I assumed, and I assumed correctly, that someone put a clip of this online because people were speculating about whether Celeborn is actually dead or not, and she said that the way it works is Theo, who she's with after in the aftermath of the volcanic eruption that created Mordor, he asks her if she's lost anyone to Morgoth, and she says my brother and also my husband, and says how she met him when she was dancing. He says you were dancing because she's all stoic and serious in the show, and then after that, she said that he went off to fight Morgoth and she never saw him again. But like I said, before that, she said that she lost him to Morgoth. So it it is possible that she's just assuming that, and it turns out that he's actually alive. And that's another thing where I would prefer that to the alternative of him actually being dead. But it seems more likely that they're just breaking the lore, and it turns out that he's dead, which is similar to the Mithril thing. Is it's for me, which just it makes it seem like they are actually breaking the lore in with both of those aspects.
Well, it's one of those things where to me it's like, where's the body? Um, she said that the last time she saw him was when he went off to war. She didn't actually see him die. He just never came back.
Yeah, but do you though, like,
So
does it seem likely to you that he is going to come back? Because that
I
that
have no
doesn't seem
idea.
likely to me.
Same shit about Isildur. They think
Well,
he's dead.
that seems to me that seems to me though that that's another thing that happens in episode 7, where he's saving Muriel, the queen of Numenor, and basically a building collapses on him. But that seems obvious to me. Like that's just a false step there. That seems to me more obvious that it's a false step because he's already been established as a main character in the show, and it would be an even more massive lore break, which would lead to a whole bunch of other massive attached lore breaks if it turns out that Isildur is actually dead. I don't think they would do that because he's supposed to cut the ring from Sauron's hand too. They're gonna change that lore too. I mean, if they're
Well,
doing
I
it,
don't
if they're
think
doing
so.
if they're
He
doing
doesn't
that
seem
and
to die.
Isildur's dead, that's too big of a lore break. It seems like if they wanted to do that, they would be deliberately trying to piss off fans, and I don't think they're deliberately trying to piss off fans.
Well, there's no body, so
Yeah.
no body, no death. Like they went to go look for him and they
But with
tried.
Caleb, the difference between Isildur and Celeborn, though, is that we haven't seen Celeborn in the show, and he hasn't even been mentioned at all until this second last episode of the season. So it seems much less likely to me that we're actually going to see Celeborn, and it turns out that he survives. And it seems, for all those reasons I mentioned in this one too, that it's much more likely that Isildur is definitely still alive.
Well, it's possible that Celeborn is still alive. It just doesn't mean that he's going to return within the time span of the show.
That would just, I mean, again, I guess that would be preferable to him actually being dead, but and he was never really a major character in the Lord of the Rings or anything like that. So I get that they wouldn't want to make him a major character, and I don't think they need to. But he could just be around and stuff like that, and giving Galadriel support or something like that. They don't need to completely edit him out of the show.
I think they probably Yeah, they probably fridged Celeborn because what the hell would he do in the show? Like, to be honest,
Yeah,
it's all.
he doesn't have to be in the show, but they didn't have to kill him off either. And again, I think it seems obvious to me that they did kill him
That's why I
off.
don't think he's dead. I think she just doesn't know where he is.
I don't know. Again, it seems to me like they're okay with some lore breaks, but they're not okay with enormous lore breaks. Like they're okay with the lore break of Celeborn being dead and Mithril containing the light of the Valar, but they're not okay with the lore break of Isildur dying because he's already been established as the main character.
Well, we'll see. We'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
Celeborn, I don't think is an important character to this story,
I don't
whether
think
he's
he is
alive or
either.
dead.
But they didn't like it would have been better if they were doing what they did until now and just never mentioned him. I would have preferred that to Galadriel even saying anything about him being killed by Morgoth, whether he actually did or not. I would have preferred him to just have
Mhm.
never been mentioned.
I guess we'll see. And we do know that being killed, you can in Tolkien lore, he can actually come back to life.
That's
So I
true.
don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. So I guess we kind of have already got into episode 7. Was there anything else we didn't cover in episode 6?
No, just you have your Numenorians and uh, one of his buddies dies. The one that's good at combat stays alive. The queen gets blinded.
Yeah, yeah.
We find
I think
out that she gets
we
blinded though in the next episode.
yeah, I think we find that in episode 7, which is that's interesting. The um is it if in the lore itself it says that for the rulers of Numenor, there were some queens who ruled Numenor. So Muriel being the queen ruler of uh, of Numenor, that does make sense. That doesn't break the lore. Um,
Hmm.
so and her being blinded is interesting. There's nothing about that in the lore, but I guess it's an interesting aspect of her character. And even though like we were talking about, I think it's dumb that they're teasing at Isildur being killed. It's interesting that Elendil is experiencing that has to experience that loss and believe that Isildur has been killed. And I guess another aspect that's interesting about episode 7 is that because Galadriel finds Theo after the volcanic eruption that causes the creation of Mordor, it seems like she's having more of a positive influence on him and she gives him her sword. So we were thinking because before in previous episodes that because he had that shard of Sauron's sword that he would perhaps turn out to be one of the Nazgul or even the Witch King of Angmar, like possibly that old guy is who put the sword in the stone that caused the volcanic eruption. But it seems like maybe due to Galadriel's positive influence that he's going to turn out to not be a bad guy now. Although it could still swing in the other direction too. But it doesn't seem like Halbrand slash Sauron will have much more influence on him now. Although that could easily happen too. So I thought that was an interesting aspect of episode 7 because it kind of took the character of Theo in a different direction from the way it seemed they were going with him.
Well, Theo is feeling guilty about what happened.
Yeah, because he thinks
So
Bronwyn's dead, right?
yeah, he's because everybody gets separated. A lot of people get separated. So Halbrand, Bronwyn. So it's just him and Galadriel traveling, and they're traveling back to Neria. They said that they would meet up after the battle. That's outside of Mordor, I guess. Because
Mm-hmm.
when they finally get to their camp, it's not like it's pretty far from the mountain, and they're not um, encountering any ash falls or anything like that. So it's mainly them making their way back to this camp, and Elendil and the Queen making their way back to the camp, and them dealing with the grief of loss. I think for Elendil, it's his son, but he's still conflicted. We see that in the next episode, it's really conflicted. But yeah, this whole episode, in my opinion, I thought 7 was a pretty weak episode.
Yeah, I did too. There wasn't really much that happened.
No, on the side of this, it's just them traveling back to their camp and regrouping. I know
Mm-hmm.
there's one point where they're back at camp and Elendil assumed that his son was back because they saw the horse.
Right.
And he went and tried to calm down the horse, but the horse couldn't be calmed.
Mm-hmm.
And we see it run back into the direction that they were coming from.
Right.
Which makes me think, oh, he and Isildur are going to unite or something like that. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. I think that's probably the case. Yeah, the I guess some other stuff that happens in episode 7 that you alluded to earlier was that the stranger slash it seems like obviously Gandalf now gets banished from the Harfoots because he accidentally hurts Nori again, and then some much more interesting stuff happens with him in episode 8. So yeah, there's some kind of interesting stuff that happens with the stranger in episode 7.
yeah, he accidentally hurts her by, it seems like he's fiddling with a tree with his magic.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the tree breaks off and it almost falls on top of Nori. It seems like
Yeah,
whenever he's trying to use his magic, there's like some type of negative consequence that happens.
yeah,
So
he
anyway, they're
doesn't.
all fearful of him because of that, and they kind of blame him in a bit for their situation. Because what happened before them is didn't those people show up and like burn down their camp? Those like
Yeah, yeah,
human
those
lizard people. I don't even know what they
yeah,
are.
those like it seemed like they were witches or something. We saw them again in
It only
episode
seems like
7.
one of them does magic, and the others, like one is wearing like armor, and the other
And
one
one of
seems
them,
more like a rogue, like character class or something.
yeah, we see in episode 8 especially that one of them is some sort of knife expert who just throws knives at people.
Yeah, and the other one has like armor or the spear or something like that.
Yeah, and there's that one main kind of bald or buzz cut haired chick who does the magic and can transform herself to look like other people. And I think it's in episode 8 that she transforms herself to look like Nori at one point to trick the stranger slash Gandalf into coming towards her. And yeah, that's
Hmm.
an interesting aspect of episode 7 where he's trying to basically heal that dying tree and stop the damage to the nature, but it backfires and does the opposite and causes that piece of the tree to fall and almost kill Nori, like you mentioned, because he still doesn't have very good control over his power yet. So
Hmm.
that's pretty interesting.
So yeah,
Yeah.
they deem him too dangerous, and he just kind of sets off on his own. I know, even though Nori like was really scared in the moment, she gives him an apple
Hmm.
and on his way. And then after he leaves, the Harfoots see that, oh, there's like fruit growing on all these trees that we thought were dead now. And they
Hmm.
have like a huge ass harvest
Yeah.
of all of these fruits.
Yeah.
And I know
So it did
And
to
then,
kind of work in a way.
well, it worked for them, but I think after they saw that it worked, like Nori got super guilty about sending him off like that. And then
Hmm.
I know at the end of the episode, Sardoc, like she says, "Oh, we need to find him because he actually was trying to help us here,
Hmm.
and he
Yeah.
gave us like this plentiful bounty of apples." So like, Lori was concerned, wanted to go after him. She was initially going to go by herself, but then a little coalition forms that consists
Yeah.
of Sardoc. Was it his wife that came too?
I think so. Yeah. I
Or
don't
was it Nori's
remember.
mom?
I don't remember the names of those
I think
other
Nori's
outfits,
mom
but
went. I think Nori's mom also went.
that's her mom. Okay.
Because I don't think the wife went. The wife stayed behind, and Nori's mom came, agreed to go. And
Okay.
then did Poppy go too, or did she stay behind? Because it
I
was
don't know, but
Sardoc, Nori's mom, Nori. I
who's
think it's
Nori's
just
friend again? What's her name?
Poppy.
Poppy. Yeah, she came with her too, right?
So yeah, so it was them four that went looking after at the end of the episode they set out looking for him. So yeah, that's kind of what happens. Like I said, seven was a bit of a weak episode. To be honest, I thought it was a little boring
Yeah, me
for the
too.
most part, but I think I really actually liked episode eight. If you want to start talking about episode eight,
Yeah, I thought it was pretty good too, actually. Yeah, I mean, just I think the one last aspect of little aspect of what happens in episode 7 is we see I think we see that
Halbrand has like
yeah,
a
we
mortal wound.
yeah, we see that Halbrand is alive, but he has some sort of mortal wound and he needs elvish medicine, so Galadriel has to take him to get healed by the elves.
I
And
almost think that the supposed mortal wound is kind of like a trick. I
yeah,
feel like.
I kind of think that too, given what happens in episode 8. So, yeah, hmm, let's start off with the less interesting stuff that happens in episode 8. So, I guess we don't really see anything else that happens with Theo, Arondir, and Bronwyn in episode 8, other than seeing Galadriel and Halbrand off, right? Or is that at the end of episode 7?
At the end of episode seven is when they find Halbrand,
Okay.
and they need
Okay,
to
so
get him.
yeah.
You know.
And
Yeah, we
I
kind of
think
say
it
goodbye to Bronwyn and Arondir and Theo in seven, so
right,
they don't come back for episode eight.
right. And I think if I remember correctly in
Oh, we
episode
also
8,
forgot to talk about. Oh yeah, we definitely forgot to talk talk about the conflict between Durin, his dad, and Elrond.
oh yeah, yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, of course. They're so basically Durin has to choose between loyalty to the dwarfs, his people, and allowing the whether he should allow the elves to survive in Middle Earth basically or not, because he has to decide whether to give them the mithril or not. And his father, who's the ruler of the dwarfs at the time, still wants to not give any of the mithril to the elves. So and Durin kind of tries to do so anyway, and his father, whose name I'm forgetting, catches him doing it and stops him from disobeying him. And but he still gives Elrond a little piece of mithril anyway. And they already talked at that. I think there's one little line about how if they can see if they can stretch it out, which is interesting because basically the same sort of suggestion that Halbrand gives to Celebrimbor in episode 8 about how you can combine stronger metals like mithril or gold and silver with weaker metals like nickel to stretch them out and enhance the properties of the stronger metal. So that's interesting too. And it's interesting that Durin has to make that choice between loyalties and between his oath and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because Elrond convinces Durin, say, hey, like, we're on our last ropes here, can you help us out? And he decides to do that.
Yeah.
So he goes and they go to the mine to try to go get to at this mithril. And as he finally opens up like a cavern full of mithril veins, that's when his dad shows up.
Yeah.
When he kind of strips him of his little, pendant, amulet, whatever you want to call it, around his chest. And they get into a pretty big argument there.
Mm-hmm.
And who do you sympathize with? Like, I couldn't really sympathize with the king.
Yeah, I couldn't really either. I mean, I kind of sympathized with Elrond the most, and also Durin because he wanted to help him, because you wouldn't want to consign your friend to death when you can help, but well, basically functional death and never being allowed to see them again and banishing them from Middle Earth forever if that can be avoided, right?
I guess, like, there were some problems. I heard some people not like that they showed a Balrog in at the bottom of the mines.
Oh, yeah, actually, I was thinking about that earlier too. That does seem like another lore break to me, because we see that in The Hobbit, Smog has taken over. I forget the other name for it, but Moria. Smog has taken over it,
I thought
but
the area in The Hobbit is not Moria. I thought it was some other dwarven kingdom.
it's not Moria.
Not to my knowledge.
Oh, okay. I thought it
It's a
was.
different. No, it's a different dwarven kingdom from what I thought. Or is it Moria?
Oh, okay. Because I think I seem to remember that during the times of The Hobbit, the dwarves had not delved too
Oh, it's
deeply past.
definitely not Moria because
Okay.
nobody's been to Moria for like forever.
Oh, okay. Because I seem to remember that there in The Hobbit, their Moria isn't supposed to have been like the dwarves are not supposed to have delved too deeply beyond the Mithril to the point where they got to a Balrog at that point, and that's supposed to happen. I think that's supposed to happen at some point between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which is why it seemed like a major lore break to me, because there shouldn't be a Balrog there yet at this point. But is
Is
that
it
what
the
you heard as a complaint from fans, or do I have the lore wrong?
No, the complaint I heard was that they made it too obvious that there's a Balrog down there. Like they left the
Oh, well, they
mystery
explicitly
out.
showed it in one shot, right?
Yeah, that's why they're kind of mad that like this is dumb. Now we know for sure there's a Balrog down there. It would have been cooler if like it just kind of sprung out of nowhere while something happened. But I kind of get now why they showed that. And one of the reasons I think that they showed it is to show that the king did have justification for shutting down like the Mistral mining operation.
Yeah, yeah. The
So he is kind of right, but so is Durin. Durin is also kind of right. But I
yeah,
think his
yeah, for
dad's
sure.
name is Durin too. It's just some different Roman numeral.
Oh, okay. Oh, I thought you would find this interesting the other day. You know how I've been reading up on the lore. I was reading I think it was volume 2 of the Book of Lost Tales, but there's a character who's in a lot of the extra works that Christopher Tolkien published posthumously after J.R.R. Tolkien died. there's a character who's in a lot of the lore whose name is Urin, because his name is Urin, but his name has that accent on the U, so his name seems to clearly be pronounced Urin.
So it's not Urin?
I think it's supposed to be Urin. Maybe I'm wrong and
Really?
it's supposed to be Urin, but it seems like it's supposed to be pronounced Urin. I'm not an expert in Tolkien pronunciations, but it looked that way to me.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I thought
I
you would
think if
find
I
that
read that,
interesting.
I'd probably, you know what, I need to get some of these extended works on audiobooks so I can check them out sometime.
Yeah, they're worth checking out. They're pretty boring in some parts, like the Silmarillion, but it's interesting to nerd out on the lore. But
Well, I started The Children of Hurin, but I'd never finished it.
oh, okay. But yeah, that is kind of a disappointing aspect with the Balrog in that episode. I feel like they just randomly threw it in there as one of the many references to Lord of the Rings to just be like, "Hey, look, this cool stuff from the other thing."
Yeah, now that I think about it, I think they threw it in to make um, Durin's dad not seem irrational.
Okay. Yeah,
Like
I guess
say,
that
here,
makes sense, but they could have done that in a different way. That they could have done that in a better way, I think.
I think so too. But yeah, I wish they kind of held off on showing a Balrog.
Yeah,
Now I guess now we know there's going to be some type of something battle going on down there in the
that would be pretty
future of the
cool.
series.
You
Yeah.
know, another cool thing about reading the lore is you see some of the epic creatures that used to exist in some of the epic battles, and in some of the lore, like in the Silmarillion and the Book of Lost Tales, there's some epic battle sequences. I thought this was so cool, where they're literally Balrogs riding dragons. I thought that was so fucking cool.
And that's in the Lost Tales.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that happens in the Silmarillion too, because that happens in the Fall of Gondolin, and that's mentioned in
Right.
both of those books.
Okay.
Yeah, it's really
That's
cool.
pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. So, yeah, so I'm glad that you remembered that because I totally forgot that whole thing between Durin and Elrond in terms of the Mithril in episode 7. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
so he gets denied by the king denies him. And it almost sounds like the king kind of stripped some of his title or something like that.
yeah,
I don't know.
it seemed that way. Yeah, I don't remember the all the details, but yeah, it seemed like he was doing something like that.
And there's like an
Um,
interesting like conservative versus liberal dynamic. It's almost like as if the king is this conservative and Durin and his wife are like woke or something.
yeah, it does kind of seem that way.
They're like
Yeah.
progressives.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Like you mentioned, now you mentioned, no, we got to stick to tradition. No, we have to do this new thing.
Yeah, so it's interesting.
Yeah,
I want to see what happens with that, but even though it makes sense, we'll see what happens with the Mithril and all that.
yep.
So I don't think
Okay.
Mithril should be this widespread thing, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So yeah, in terms of episode 8, yeah, there's a lot of really interesting stuff that happens in there, and I'm generally a fan of, well, especially the Sauron stuff, and some of the Gandalf stuff is cool. Like I said, it seems obvious to me that the stranger is supposed to be Gandalf now, but I didn't like the fact that they ended episode 8 with Nori just going off with Gandalf. I was like, oh, of course they have to have the Hobbit like creature go off with Gandalf, even though the Harfoots are fucking awful. Like, I don't think any of the three of us, you, me, and Tristram, like the Harfoots throughout the whole season. But
Yeah, they're not my
basically,
favorites. I don't hate them though.
oh, okay. There, so basically, though, in episode 8, it kind of focuses on what's happening with Nori and the stranger, who they tease at being Sauron at first because one of those witches or whatever you want to call them calls him Sauron, but then it turns out that he's not Sauron when he protects Nori instead. So it kind of centers around those characters, and then what's happening with Galadriel and Halbrand, where it's revealed that he's actually Sauron, and where they meet up with Elrond and Celebrimbor, where he's constructing basically that forge to make what will turn out to be the Rings of Power. And though that part of the episode in particular is my favorite, and like you were kind of saying too. So let's go into the stranger slash Gandalf slash Nori stuff first, though. So I like that there were actually some cool magic battles between him and the witch characters or whatever, and um, I'm curious to hear what you think about that, and whether you agree with me that it seems like the stranger is obviously supposed to be Gandalf at this point.
Well, there's that last quote that makes it super obvious, but at this, it wasn't obvious to me until they made that quote at the end of the episode.
Which
But
one?
that you got to follow your nose.
Right. Yeah. Of course. Whenever
He
you're in
literally
doubt,
says
always follow
that.
your nose. Yeah.
He literally
Exactly.
says that.
Yeah.
But
And
so
when they said those witch characters at first, they said one of them called him Sauron, and then when he protects Nori, they say he's not Sauron, he's the other, the Ishtari. So he has to be one, and then those lines and other things too make it seem really obvious that he's Gandalf.
yeah, one thing we have to remember is that both Sauron and the Ishtari are Maiar.
Yes.
So I guess there's some type of way in which they have to enter into this world. And I guess it has to do with them falling in a meteor. I guess Sauron had entered the world in that way before.
Okay.
But yeah, so they mistook him for a different Maiar. And like, oh, you're not one of the, you're not Sauron, you're one of them, and Ishtari. And that's kind of when the tides turn. Because at this point, too, Gandalf is doubting um, his own existence, right? He's doubting his purpose. He doesn't have all of his memories. He's kind of like been in a state of confusion for a while. He knows he
Yeah.
has to go somewhere, but he doesn't know why.
Yeah, and those witch characters kind of have convinced him at one point in the episode that he is Sauron, or at least he's evil, and he
Mm-hmm.
can't be good because he's just destined to be evil.
Right. So they're trying to convince him that he's somebody he's not. And that also, the Harfoots are on the case, so they're following him and trying to find out what's going on.
Hmm.
And we know that in their first encounter, um, the stranger doesn't like these people. Like they burnt down his friend's caravan,
Yeah.
and he's not convinced totally that he's what they're presenting, because they have to like don't they like either beat him up or something, or, well, this is where it gets confusing, because I know there's an illusion created where they bind him and put him up in a tree or something like that,
Hmm.
but that's not actually what happens. But I think they got into a fight, and then they beforehand,
Yeah.
so he was like kind of like knocked out in the corner while she set up some illusion that he was tied up in order to draw out the Harfoots.
Yeah, she did that thing where she set up that trap, and she's the one who's kind of like a shapeshifter, and she made herself look like the stranger, aka Gandalf, and they made it look like they were tying him up to draw in the Harfoots, and then they attacked him, and he turned into shapeshifter chick as soon as Nori approached him, I think. Yeah.
Mhm. And then during this conflict, doesn't Sardoc make like the ultimate sacrifice?
Yeah, he does something. I think he jumps in front of someone, and I think it's that knife throwing woman. She throws a knife at him, or I don't remember whether it's that or he gets injured in some other way.
Well, he blocks a knife throw and it gets hits him in the gullet,
Right.
and
Okay.
he's still able to move around surprisingly well after that
Yeah.
because he does continue to help fight
Yeah.
against these people.
That
But we
seems like
do get
kind
to
of hey, this is a movie, so in movies, if you have enough willpower, it doesn't matter if you're injured until such time as you decide to die.
yeah, and then I guess we does Gandalf have healing powers? Because he didn't even like attempt to heal Sardoc.
I was wondering that too. I was thinking he just finally, it seems like he finally just figured out how to use his powers for good because the witch characters, they lit a whole section of the forest or whatever it was that they were in on fire, and then he put out those fires and he beat them and they went away. So I was
Well,
wondering that
somebody
too.
stole the staff and handed it to Gandalf, and he
Yeah,
used the
yeah,
staff to like completely destroy them.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if he
Yeah,
destroyed them or he just turned them into moths. I'm not even
actually, yeah,
quite
it
sure
did
what
seem like
happened.
he basically turned them into dust or some sort of fragments. Maybe their souls still exist and they can get resurrected or something
Well,
like
I
that.
know there's like
And
a moth. There's like a moth involved with all of their. As I saw when he was using magic on them, like their bodies turned to dust, but there was like this moth there. So I was like, huh, what's going on? I'm not sure exactly.
yeah. Yeah, I thought it was weird too, like especially with his staff, like you said, it seems like it helps him direct and focus his power. And I was wondering why he didn't try to he didn't try to heal that guy too, because it seems like he would, even if he didn't know how to do it, it seems like he would at least try to do it.
Well, I guess maybe he's afraid because whenever he tries to do things, things seemingly bad happen. And
Yeah,
also, the staff was destroyed, so he didn't have that tool to use. Was when he did that to the, I don't know what you want to call them, the three wanderers or whatever the hell they were. And when he performed that like crazy magical spell, the staff just fizzled and turned to dust. It's like it was too much magic for that particular item to use. But I did like
yeah,
the magical confrontation and that I really was entertained by that portion of
yeah, yeah,
this
that was
episode.
cool. Where they were using that one kind of witch woman was using her magic powers to throw Gandalf around and twist him around and stuff
Yeah, it
that
kind
and
of
their
reminded
magic
me of
battles.
like, yeah, it reminded me a little of about Saruman versus Gandalf.
Oh yeah, there's
I
staff
always found
fighting in
that,
Fellowship of the Ring.
yeah, I always found that fight pretty funny because I don't know, it just looked funny because like old people were just getting slammed against the walls.
Yeah.
Just being like, man, I hope they're using stunt people here because these dudes are old and there's no way in hell they'd be able to like perform these feats of action.
Except that they're magical wizards, so they have magical wizard powers.
Yeah, but they're also actors, and
Yeah, yeah, of course. In real life,
Christopher
though,
Lee and Ian McClellan were not youngins when
of
that movie
course,
came out.
of course.
Like I
Yeah,
remember during The Hobbit, like Christopher Lee was barely alive.
yeah, yeah. In the when they were making the Hobbit movies, um, the filmmakers came to film all of his stuff in his studio in London because he was too old to travel already at that point.
Yeah, he looks pretty damn old. I was like, this guy's not gonna last. very long.
and he didn't.
He looked super, super old, and I was like, oh shit.
Yeah, yeah,
He's like
he definitely.
he's like usually at that age when you don't see actors coming back and performing roles anymore.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I was thinking that too when I started watching Westworld finally relatively recently, because Anthony Hopkins is in the first two episodes of that, and I know the show is probably at least 5 years old or something like that
Yeah,
now,
it's
but
pretty old. That's 5 years old, yeah.
he must be old as fuck at this point though, because he's got
Well, at this
white hair
point,
and stuff
yeah.
too.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think he was pretty okay in Westworld. He seemed like his vitality seemed okay. He didn't
yeah,
seem like he
yeah,
was barely trudging along and could barely move. That's kind of what I had the sense from Christopher Lee. Like to me, it seemed like he didn't even. It didn't seem like he had energy when he was like performing these roles. And
yeah.
you could
I
tell like
see.
he was so old. You could see like the liver spots and like his eyes like glazing over from oldness and all that. I was like, oh man, this guy is has a foot in death's door. It looks like.
Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, he did look way more the worse for wear too. Yeah, Anthony
Yeah,
Hopkins
he
still
looks
seemed to have a
super
lot of
old
energy.
compared to like the Lord of the Rings. Like the Lord of the Rings, he was old, but he wasn't like decrepit old. But in the
Yeah,
Hobbit, I was like, oh shit, he's like barely moving around.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting to see young Gandalf, and like I was saying, I'm interested, like I was telling you guys I think yesterday, uh I am kind of looking I'm kind of looking forward to see what happens with Gandalf in season 2, because we know now that he has to go to that place called Rune, which seems
Hmm.
obviously like some sort of place with ancient runes where he has to figure out some whatever the next part of his destiny will be. So that's it. I'm looking forward to that, but I'm not looking forward to the fact that Nori's gonna be with him, because I'm so tired of her and the Harfoots. Why do they have to keep her in the show?
Well, it's
I
just
knew that
one. This is one Harfoot.
at least, yeah, at least there's that now.
I think it's gonna be fine because at least Nori to me is the most tolerable Harfoot. I don't really have a
Yeah,
problem with her that much.
she's basically
Um,
just female Frodo or Bilbo.
yeah, basically. Um, yeah, I don't really have a problem with her. I'm fine. Like, I don't like hate the Harfoots that much.
I was just
Um,
I didn't really hate them. I just was always bored with what was happening with them. I just didn't care.
well, I didn't necessarily care about the Harfoots, but I did care about the things that were revolving around the stranger.
Yeah, well, yeah, I feel the same way basically. I cared about him, but I didn't care about the Harfoots, and they just happened to be involved with each other throughout the season.
Right, but at least we have a lot of development for the stranger. He's now like fully cognizant. He can speak like full sentences. He can communicate. He can tell quips now and jokes, it seems like.
Yeah, and he knows that
And
he's a good guy now.
yeah, so yeah, they made it pretty obvious by the end of the episode that this is Gandalf. So, what were the clues you saw that says, okay, this is Gandalf for sure?
Well, other than those lines that he said, like "follow your nose" and that stuff where he was reversing the fire magic, which
Hmm.
the I thought that was particularly meaningful, especially because that witch character did the same type of thing that he did in a previous episode, where it kind of seemed like she was making fire from her hands, and then she did produce fire at one point, and then he put out the fire. And then also just the fact that he's been going around with these Harfoots, and he's the he's one of the only Ishtari we know that has had a fondness for hobbits basically throughout the ages. Of course, the Harfoots break the lore because they're not supposed to be in Middle Earth at this point, but we know that Gandalf hangs out around with hobbits, so it makes more
Oh,
sense for him to
Gandalf
be with
breaks the
hobbit
lore
for
too.
characters. Yeah, Gandalf
So,
being there breaks the lore too. Yeah,
but I don't think, how can that be? Because wasn't Gandalf, I don't know, because when the War of the Rings happened, how did Gandalf get a ring?
I don't remember because that's a good question because does he have which one of the rings does he have? Does he have one of the Elven rings?
I know he has a ring, I just don't know which one it is.
I'm gonna look that up. Which ring does Gandalf have? Because I was thinking about that at the end of episode 8 because we saw the three Elven rings being made, and I know that Galadriel has one. I seem to remember that Elrond has one. So
Hmm.
um, Narya the Great. This is not revealed until the end of The Lord of the Rings as Frodo reaches the Quayside to leave Middle-earth when Gandalf now wore openly on his hand the third ring, Narya the Great. Oh, the third ring, that seems like it is one of the Elven rings. I'm gonna go
So he
to
gets the Elven ring?
so Narya, Nenya, and Vilya.
So he does
So
have one of the Elven rings.
the first ring, Narya, was adorned with a red gemstone. Oh yeah, we saw that as one of the three Elven rings made at the end of episode 8. One of it has a red gemstone. Tolkien stated it was a ruby. Name is derived from Quenya, which means fire, also called Narya the Great, Ring of Fire, the Red Ring, the Kindler. Unlike the other, oh, so it is an elven ring. Unlike the other elven rings, it is not said what metal Narya was made of. Oh, that could be a place for why they would add mithril into the mythology.
Mithril alloy.
Yeah,
Mithril
it is
alloy.
described as giving its wielder resistance to the weariness of time. That would make sense for why Gandalf could live forever. Although he's one of the Maiar anyway, so I guess he wouldn't need it for that. And the
Mm.
power to inspire others to resist tyranny. Oh, that's interesting. Gandalf is good at that. Domination and
Hmm.
despair. In other words, evoking hope in others around the wielder. Círdan kept Narya after Gil-galad's death.
So
At some
Gil-galad is the
point,
wielder of
oh,
this.
at some point during the Third Age, Círdan passed the ring to the wizard Gandalf to aid him in his labors, having recognized his true nature as one of the Maiar from Valinor.
So
Oh,
he
okay.
found out he was a Maiar.
So the second ring Nenya was made of. Oh, look at this! The second ring Nenya was made of mithril and adorned with a white stone. Oh, so at least one of them being made, the Nenya being made of mithril does tie in with the lore. Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Oh, okay. So
The name
they
is
had to make it
derived
out of
from
mithril then.
yeah. The name is derived from the Quenya Nen, meaning water, is also called the Ring of Adamant, the Ring of Water, and the White Ring. The ring was wielded by Galadriel of Lothlorien. Okay, so that's Galadriel's ring. And then the third ring, Vilya, was made of gold and adorned with a great blue stone. Yeah, we saw that as one of the three elven rings at the end of episode 8. Probably a
Hmm.
sapphire. The name is derived from Quenya after Vilya or air. It is also called the Ring of Air, the Ring of Firmament, or the Blue Ring. Vilya was the mightiest of the three rings, as mentioned in the ending chapter in The Return of the King. The exact power of Vilya is not stated, though the Silmarillion states that Celebrimbor had forged the three to heal and to preserve, rather to enhance the strengths of each individual bearer, as the 7, 9, and lesser rings did. That makes sense for them having being a circle and them being three different rings to kind of balance each other out with their power, like Galadriel was suggesting.
Hmm.
When Sauron laid waste to Eregion, Vilya was sent to the Elven King Gil-galad far away in Lindon. Oh, okay. Where it was later given to Elrond. There you go. Who bore it through the later years of the Second Age and all of the Third. Oh yeah. Okay. So it is Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel who have the three Elven rings.
By the third age. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, yeah, there's a bit of lore break because I think the Ishtari aren't supposed to show up till the Third Age.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Yeah.
So Gandalf really isn't supposed to be around right now, which is why people were kind of upset.
Yeah,
Which
they're
I
getting
don't,
to
I don't
be
really care anymore. It's like whatever. To me,
they're
it's
getting to
like
be too many lore breaks in the show. I mean, it is cool to see Gandalf, but they could have easily added some other similar magical creature. It doesn't have to even have to be one of the Maiar. Like it could be some other really good,
yeah, but
powerful
isn't it
creature.
cool that it's Gandalf and we get
It
to
is
see
kind
some
of
type of origin story?
it is kind of cool that it's Gandalf, even though it breaks the lore. Yeah, I do agree about that. Yeah.
um, I'm just interested to see what type of origin story they're gonna craft here. Um, yeah, I'm just interested to see how does Gandalf become like this cool, like fatherly wizard figure.
Yeah, yeah, that will be cool to see. I'm still gonna be endlessly just annoyed by Nori because I don't care about her, but it just seems like they're trying to just copy the Gandalf and Frodo or Gandalf and Bilbo dynamic. I get why they're doing that, but they didn't have to. They could have made a Lord of the Rings fantasy show without sticking to so many of the tropes that were in Lord of the Rings. But I do like that they made some changes with a lot of changes in terms of that too.
Yeah, but there is a subversion of one of these tropes.
Which one?
And well, the subversion would be like the king without a country.
Oh, right.
Because they were going to make what? Oh, Halbrand is the lost king to the
Yeah, yeah,
Southlands.
like the parallel of Aragorn. But it turns out
Yeah, but
that
it
he
got
was just
subverted.
yeah, that was interesting. I like what they did with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
So
that's a good segue because we basically talked about Gandalf now. So both of our
I'll just
favorite
say here
parts
about
of the episode.
Halbrand, I
Hmm.
fucking called it.
You did?
Remember I said in episode 3, I was like, oh yeah, this he's gonna be
Yeah.
Sauron.
I remember we were speculating and saying that it's definitely possible that Halbrand is either Sauron or the Witch King of Angmar or one of the Nazgul. I forget which one of us said it was Sauron. I didn't think it was me who thought it was Sauron, so it was you
No, I
then, right?
thought it was
Yeah.
Sauron for
Okay.
sure. I was like, this
Yeah.
has to be Sauron.
I was kind of more thinking that he was going to be the Witch King of Angmar. I thought that was more likely. So I was kind of pleasantly surprised that he turned out to be Sauron, and I thought it was interesting that he was basically deceiving Galadriel throughout the whole season. Although, like as you and Tristram and I were discussing, it also it just it kind of makes Galadriel seem unrealistically dumb that she didn't have the slightest hint throughout the whole season, and she didn't look into his bloodline more carefully in Numenor, for example. I was thinking because when she asked that elf to check the records of the kings of the Southlands in Linden. He said that they don't have many records of the history of the humans, and you would think that they would have more records in Numenor. And she went to check them in Numenor with Halbrand, and it seems like maybe she just didn't check thoroughly enough when she was in there. And there were other aspects of his character that she could have looked into more, and she should have been smarter about.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Like, I don't know. I thought they did okay with it. At least she did get suspicious in the end. But
Hmm.
from what I remember, there wasn't anything that was suspicious really. Because us as readers would know that this is a possible Sauron, but it's not. I don't feel that Galadriel would know.
Yeah.
It's even kind of weird that she got suspicious at all, to
Yeah,
be honest.
that's actually a good point too. It seemed it did seem like she just kind of got suspicious at the last minute. And yeah, I just like I said though, I think the way that they had this big reveal of him being Sauron and that he was manipulating her for the whole season and she's been hunting for Sauron, but he was right next to her, within her vicinity for the whole time was interesting. And it turns out that he was manipulating Celebrimbor into making the 3 Elven rings of power, and him doing that whole, causing Galadriel to have that whole hallucination and trying to convince her to come to his side. I thought that was really cool too, even though that's also a bit of a lore break, because Sauron is supposed to be this just up to, oh, Dusty got kicked out there. Hopefully he'll be back in a sec. Sauron is supposed to be this two-dimensional bad guy. Basically, there's not supposed to be this aspect of him trying to convince anyone that he's a good guy. So that seems like kind of a lore break to me. You got kicked out there for a second. What
Oh
was
yeah,
the
for a
last
little
thing you?
bit. What was the last thing I said?
No, that I said. I was saying that it's cool, that whole kind of hallucination sequence with Sauron, where he puts Galadriel into this sort of hallucination, and he's trying to corrupt her and to convince him to come over to his side. I thought that was cool, even though that was a lore break, because Tolkien's Sauron is supposed to be this just two-dimensional bad guy who wants evil. So it doesn't make sense for him to kind of believe that he's actually the good guy and try to get people over to his side by saying, "Listen, I'm actually the good. Listen, Gladriel, I'm actually the good guy." Okay, that's not that kind of breaks the lore too. But again, I still thought that was cool. Just the way they did the whole hallucination sequence was really cool, and it being revealed how manipulative and evil Halbrand / Sauron is, I thought that was cool too.
Oh yeah, the interesting thing about Sauron is he's basically a servant of Morgoth, who's what, dead.
Yes.
So he's kind of aimless, but he tries to convince Galadriel that he's trying to heal Middle Earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And right now, it's like, they do make a little this ambiguous, but in the end, you see him going to Mordor. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
I thought that was cool in the end, and they had his evil face showing more, and they basically kind of showed him going right into Mordor, which is one of the many callbacks in the show, I think, to Fellowship of the Ring. Like, one of many other examples is the Gandalf saying, "When in doubt, follow your nose." That last shot of him going into Mordor reminded me of the shot in the final shot in Fellowship of the Ring when Frodo and Sam are entering Mordor.
Yeah, so I know Galadriel eventually gets herself out of this dream sequence. Because I know he appears to her as her brother, and she doesn't believe that. And then he tries to
Yeah,
make an appeal that, oh, he's trying to undo the damage. And it is confusing because, like, what is he doing, actually?
yeah,
Like, it's not very clear at this point in the show of what his actual plan is.
yeah.
So if
And
we're taking
it's
it on a bit by bit basis, like say if someone is just approaching this show without knowing any Lord of the Rings background, it's possible that there's kind of an air of mystery about what's going to happen.
mm-hmm.
I don't quite know what his motives are. So, and we still got more rings to be forged. We still got more deceptions that need to be made. So we'll
Yep.
see what happens. The only thing I was confused though is like her behavior. One, it also seems that Elrond also finds out that he is not who he says he is. And when
Yeah,
it
because
goes back to
he's the one
yeah,
who discovers Galadriel when she's drowning in some water, because Sauron has simulated them being back on that raft where they first met in episode 2, I think it was,
Right.
and he saves her, and he basically says that, or no, he saves her, and she basically doesn't tell him what just happened, but I found this confusing too, that she decided to go ahead with making those 3 rings anyway, even though she just found out that Halbrand, who has been working on the rings and was manipulating Celebrimbor, is who wanted them to make the 3 elven rings. And then because Elrond is suspicious and worried about Galadriel, and she said that Halbrand won't be back. Basically, he looked at the records that she was looking at, showing that the line of the King of the Southlands ended 1,000 years ago, and I think she still doesn't tell him though that
No, none of them.
Halbrand
She
is
doesn't tell
Sauron though.
that. Yeah, she does not tell them who
Yeah,
he really is. So she's not
yeah,
forthright with that information. But I
hmm
think like her eyes are on the prize of the rings. So
hmm
I'm a little confused about her particular behavior here. Like I don't know why she's lying about Sauron. I don't
yeah.
know
I don't either.
why. Yeah, I don't know why she's not giving them information. I don't know why she's now like really eager about these rings.
Yeah,
Because
I
it's
don't get
not
it either.
clear. I don't think it's clear to her that there's something bad about these rings. And we know from the lore, the particular elven ones, there's nothing really bad about those rings. So at this point, there's not really anything to fear, really, of these rings.
Yeah.
It sounds like,
Well, it's yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens with those other rings, because we still have to see the rings made for men and the ones made for dwarves. And now that we know that Galadriel knows that Halbrand wanted these 3 elven rings to get made, um, we were both saying, it's confusing
well,
that she still went along with it even after that she found that. But it'll be interesting to find out what happens with the dynamic with Celebrimbor, because he's supposed to be corrupted by Sauron into making the rest of the rings, and then the one ring of power to control all of the rest of the rings, right?
well, I'll say here, it's possible that Sauron is
Y-
truly just seeking learning here when it comes to the forged craft of the rings. At this point, I'm pretty sure he doesn't know how to create a Horcrux to put his soul into this ring or whatever. So I think he's like
yeah,
genuinely I don't think he's being manipulated like he's manipulating them to create the rings. I think he's genuinely interested on the process, and he is actually brainstorming with them to figure out this process. I don't think he's coming in knowing
okay,
this. And the reason why I have this
okay.
theory is because what he learned from this session of creating the Elven rings, I think he's going to use what he learned here to create the rest of the rings.
Like he'll create them himself.
I believe that's what's probably going to happen because
Okay.
I
That would
don't
be
think
another
we're
lore
going to
break.
see him.
Celebrimbor is supposed to be the one who makes all the rings.
Right, but because okay, it's weird because in I'll say this: in the Shadow of Mordor, do you remember that little cutscene I sent you?
Mm-hmm.
That is like the only thing that I've seen that describes him creating the rings. And as you saw in that little cutscene, it's like Sauron describing himself as some elf lord or something like that. The
Right.
only way that Sauron would be able to get back into the mix is if he disguises himself as some other character. If that's not going to be the case,
Yeah.
then Halbrand is just going to take the knowledge he gained from being involved in the forging of the Elven rings to forge these rings on his own. But I don't know. We're going to have to see how that's going to work. If he's going to be Sauron the Deceiver and then take the form of different people and try to interject himself again, or if he's just going to do it himself. I don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out.
I hope that they go with the latter route if they're going to do one of those two options and they have him do some more shape-shifting or something and corrupt Celebrimbor somehow. Or the only other way that could work that I can think of is that if Halbrand still convinces Celebrimbor to do it and Galadriel doesn't tell Celebrimbor that Halbrand is Sauron, but I don't know why that would happen, but it would make more sense because she's keeping that a secret from Celebrimbor and Elrond already for some reason, which is confusing, as we mentioned.
Well, yeah, we'll have to see. I think it's also important for me to stay open to see what can happen. So I have no idea how they're gonna make the rest of these rings, and I guess they have what 4 more seasons to figure it out.
They're doing 5 seasons?
Isn't that what they were planning on? 5 seasons?
I seem to remember when we looked that up about House of the Dragon before, we saw that there were going to be 5 seasons of that. I don't remember how many seasons of Rings of Power there are supposed to be. I'm going to look that up right now.
I thought it was 5, but I could be wrong. I have to say that the visuals are pretty damn top notch with this show. I'll say that.
Yeah, you can tell that they spent their money there, which is good. Yeah. I just wish they had more of that because the show overall is still really slow paced and kind of boring for me in some parts, and they could have more epic battles and stuff. I was thinking about this too, where I'm a defender of the Hobbit movies, even though some people aren't, because a lot of the stuff that they added still is lore stuff from the appendice. Oh, it's you getting a call there. Still is lore stuff in the appendices and the Silmarillion and whatnot. But they just added it into the Hobbit, and a lot of it is so they can have more awesome combat and battle sequences. So I thought that was cool. But the stuff that they're adding in the show is mostly for adding all of these storylines and stuff that don't many of which don't exist in the lore, or they're taking them in different directions, which is why I don't like the show as much.
So far, yeah, I'm okay. Right. I'm okay with the show.
You're right. There will be 5 seasons of the show. Yeah, I think you and Tristram like the show a little bit more than me. I don't hate it like a lot of people, like that guy Shad who we were talking about, and a lot of people who just think it's like woke bullshit. I don't think that. I think to me it's a mediocre show, and I still am gonna watch season 2 mostly to see what happens with Sauron and Gandalf. But yeah, I think you and Tristram like it a little more than I do.
Yeah, I think just from fantasy shows in general, I don't know. I don't think it's mediocre. I think it is above average. Like just the visuals alone put it above average. But as far as what's happening now, I was pretty entertained by the last episode, juxtaposed to the 7th, where I was kind of bored. But as far as like episode 8 goes, it's probably one of my favorites in this season.
Yeah, I would say so too. Actually, I wasn't that big of a fan of episode 6 or 7, although I like 6 more than 7. But yeah, 8 is one of my favorites too. And we talked before about how I kind of found the first 2 episodes to be boring, but I liked episode 3 to 5, and I'm not sure what my favorite episode would be in this season. I think it might actually be either 3 or 8 would probably be my favorite one if I had to think of one just off the top of my head. I definitely don't remember which events happen in which episode in terms of episode 3 to 5 though.
3 is Numenor. Um,
Yeah,
I don't
that's one of my
remember.
favorites because of Numenor and all that stuff.
5 is basically when Arondir brought the tower down.
Right.
Uh, and 4, I forgot what happened before, but I'm pretty sure it has something to do with Elrond's doing something. But I think in
Okay.
4, they're trying to
Yeah.
convince the queen or whatever. I don't know. I just thought episode 8 was pretty damn notable. I really enjoyed the
Yeah.
magic fight with the stranger. I liked the reveal with Halbrand, even though I knew it's like, okay, as soon as she got suspicious, okay, that Halbrand is in fact Sauron. I knew
Yeah, yeah, me
it.
too. Yeah, as soon as she got suspicious, I had that feeling too. And I was thinking too in terms of adaptations that a cool aspect of that hallucination sequence was that it reminded me of the similar sequence between Rand and Baalzamon at the end of season 1 of the
Right.
Wheel of Time show. Yeah.
There's definitely some comparisons. Yeah, I was like, wow, this is very similar to the last episode of Wheel of Time where they're doing this kind of thing that's occurring in the characters' heads.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was totally like really the same, like a mental manipulation.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was my favorite part of the episode, I would say. So yeah, but I think maybe it sounds like we might agree that our favorite episode of the season is episode 8. Yeah, that was a
Yeah,
pretty
it's
good one, I
definitely
would
my
say.
favorite. Like we finally got the culmination of the stranger becoming not the stranger. He's no longer a stranger. And we got the Halbrand resolution. We got to see the goddamn rings being forged, which is a pretty epic and momentous event in the history of Middle Earth. Like seeing that actually occur on screen was pretty awesome. And they
Yeah,
did take their
definitely.
time and they made it look pretty cool, like the process. It's not like they
Hmm.
did like, oh, let's just kind of do this real quick and there's rings. It's like, yeah, they definitely took their time in crafting the scene in which they finally forged those rings.
That whole
So we
detailed
finally have
contraption that they
rings of
designed
power.
for, yes, exactly. Definitely. That whole cool intricate contraption they created for pouring the molten metal into, and it goes down this really long and winding trail to the point where it has the mold for the ring was interesting too.
Yeah, and I like the reveal. You get to see the 3 rings. I was like, oh
Hmm.
man, let's see what they're gonna get up to now.
First 3 rings of power. So I wonder which rings are going to be created next. I wonder if the dwarven ones are going to be created first, or the ones for men are going to be created first.
I think since they've probably integrated the dwarves, like they already have a hierarchy so far, so it seems like the dwarves are gonna be next because there's no kingdoms. Like the only kingdom of men that we have so far is Numenor, and then I guess we have the Southlands. But then again, Halbrand is. I don't know if he's going to present himself back at the Southlands as a king or not. But
Yeah,
the dwarves
that
seem
seems
like a
doubtful. It
good
seems like he's going
next.
to go and dwell in Mordor now.
Yeah, it seems like the dwarves would be the next place to concentrate because there's definitely some conflict going on, at least between the son and the father, that's unresolved. So I think maybe they might focus on making those dwarven rings next.
Okay. Yeah, that would make sense. There, like you said, there aren't really many rulers of men around at this point, seemingly. Although it could be the case that there are still some of the places that are supposed to exist in the Second Age that are big places of rulership for men that we just haven't seen yet in the series. But yeah, given what's happened so far, it does seem like, based on what you said, that it makes more sense for them to create the dwarven rings first.
Yeah, it seems like that would be the path. It seems next season they're gonna have to develop the human kingdoms. As
Mm-hmm.
we've only seen the Southlands, I assume there's other kingdoms scattered here and there. Maybe they might, because did the Rohirrim exist back then? What's going on with Gondolin? What's going on with all these other human civilizations? So, maybe they might start focusing on these things. But we'll have to
Yeah,
see what the next big conflict is going to be. Yeah, Mordor is there simmering in the background, but what's Sauron going to be up to next season? We'll have to see. He's definitely going to have to manipulate some folks.
yep, yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I was very pleasantly surprised by episode 8 overall, especially with the Sauron stuff, because given like some of my complaints of the show so far. Oh, Dusty got kicked out again. Hopefully he'll be back here in a sec. Yeah, given some of my complaints about the show so far, I was wondering whether the finale would end in such a way that I would want to continue on and watch season 2. But so yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised with what happened with the season finale, because now I do definitely want to continue on to season 2. Let's okay, let's see what happened with Dusty here, because he got kicked out. Hopefully he'll be back. Oh, there he is. There you are. Did you
I
catch?
keep pressing the wrong.
Oh, it's the wrong button. I think he was saying there. Yeah. So, yeah, when he gets back, we'll get his feelings about season 2. It sounds like Dusty's excited about what's going to happen in season 2 also. Hey, you were pressing the wrong button there?
I don't know. I just pressed something on the screen and it like kicks me out of the page or something.
Oh, that's weird.
I was trying to put my phone case back on and it's like beep. Oh, you're gone out of there. I don't know
Hmm,
what I pressed exactly.
that's weird.
I
Hmm,
was just trying to put my phone case back together.
okay. Yeah, I was
Forgot to
just
put my
saying
phone
that
away.
I was pleasantly surprised by the season 1 finale of the show, because I was wondering, given some of my complaints, whether the finale would be good enough for me to want to continue on and watch season 2. So I am looking forward to season 2, especially what happens with Sauron and Gandalf, and like you were saying, maybe the development of some of the more human kingdoms. So I'm pleasantly surprised by the season finale, and I'm looking forward to what is happening
Well,
in season 2.
I have a really high tolerance for watching bad shows. So even if the show
Yeah, you
did
do.
tank, I was likely to finish it to its conclusion. As you didn't like Halo, I finished Halo. Um, so I think the only show I didn't finish that was like a fantasy show that I started was the Shannara Chronicles.
Oh
I can
yeah.
finish the first season, and then I tried to watch the second season, and it was like, horrible.
Wow, that must be really bad, given like you were just saying how high your tolerance is for bad shows.
Well, it's just that the first episode of But the Shannara Chronicles was just boring as fuck. Like, and that, and I think it got past where I was reading. So I was like, maybe I should read more Shannara books before I embark on this.
I was actually thinking about rereading the Shannara books that I read when I was a teenager at some point, sometime soon, because I haven't read them since then. And I think I only read maybe a handful or so of them back then, but I know that Terry Brooks continued on that series and did a whole bunch of spin-off series of that original series. So I kind of want to reread those original books and then read the rest of the series as long as it's still good. I remember it being pretty good.
I thought it was okay. I guess the only problem is that the audiobooks are narrated by Scott Brick,
Oh dear.
which I do not like Scott Brick. He's just
Yeah,
super annoying to me.
yeah. He's way over the
I
top
think
with
that's
all of his
probably,
voices.
yeah, like the absolute worst performance I've ever heard him in was, what's that book you like about going into the jungle?
Heart of
Heart of
Darkness?
Darkness. That was like the worst Scott Brick book I've ever listened to.
Oh man, that's awful. It's such a good book
Um,
too. He ruined it.
no, I switched to a different like narrator.
Okay.
Like 20 minutes in, I was like, I can't do this fake British accent. I'm done.
Okay.
I think the second worst books I've heard from Scott Brick are basically the Shannara books.
Okay.
I got through them, but damn, um, I just don't like his narration. I
Yeah,
don't like narrators that can't do character voices.
he's
He just happens
like
to be one of those people.
he's one end of the spectrum of why audiobook narrators can be terrible, because there's some terrible audiobook narrators sometimes that just sound like they're totally bored by what they're reading, and he's on the totally opposite end of the spectrum where he's just way over the top and he makes characters sound like so unrealistic that it ruins the narrative. And then there are people who do a really the good audiobook narrators do good character voices, but they don't do like ridiculously over the top ones, but they still have emotion in their voices. They have the perfect balance for that. Like I'm forgetting their names right now, but like the narrators of the Wheel of Time books.
Oh yeah, Kate Redding and Michael Kramer.
Yes, yeah.
I just don't like Scott Brick's cadence. Like every character sounds like a fucking pompous yuppie, no
Yeah.
matter what their economic background is.
Yeah.
Um, I'm okay when he's reading stuff written in the 50s because he sounds like somebody that was on a radio program in the 50s because they tend to, like, those programs tend to be overly melodramatic, stuff from the 40s and 50s. So I had no problem. Didn't really have much of a problem when he was narrating some of Asimov's books. He was okay there. If I had to revisit Shannara, which I do eventually, because I did want to continue on the series, I'm just hoping his narration doesn't piss me off too much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I'm glad that I have some of the original books in physical book form. I think I have maybe 5. I think I have the original trilogy, a prequel, and I guess one other one in one of the, at least a few different kind of spin-off series he did of the original series, but that takes place in the same world.
Yeah, the original trilogy is interesting because each of the 3 books has a different protagonist from the same lineage,
Oh,
which
okay,
is
I didn't even
weird
remember that.
because, oh yeah, like Will is I think he's the first protagonist, and then like many years later, his like son becomes like the protagonist. So in
Okay.
each book, it's like years and years apart.
Okay. Oh yeah,
But in
that's
the
cool.
show, it's just Will was like, "Oh, we're gonna take the protagonist from the first book and put him in the story of the second book because the show
Hmm.
starts at the second book.
Oh really? It doesn't start with the first book?
Nope, starts at the second book.
Why would they do that?
I don't know. That's where they started it at.
Okay.
That's where they started it at. I don't know why they chose to do it there, but that's where they started the show at.
That's weird. Yeah, I'm definitely not gonna watch that show because like you were saying, you have a much higher tolerance for bad shows than I do, and if even you could barely make it through the first season and couldn't watch the second, that's not a good sign for me.
I'm gonna try. I'm going to try to watch Legend of the Seeker one of these days.
Is it supposed to be really bad?
I hope. I heard it's not as bad as Janra, but it's supposed to be pretty low budget. So we're talking about like Hercules and Xena budget, type of
Oh,
thing.
okay.
But I'm willing to check it out just to you know, see what people say, see what I think. I also know there's a Dresden show.
Oh yeah, that one that Daniel Green did a review video of that seems like it's probably terrible.
Yeah, I think I want to eventually check it out though, just to check it out. It'd be interesting to see how they portray the characters.
Is there is there only one season or one episode? I don't remember.
Oh, there's a season,
There's a whole
and
season?
it's a Monster of the Week thing. No,
Oh, okay. Like they were trying to copy Buffy in a way, perhaps?
yeah, Buffy or the X Files in some way, but that had some of the X Files episodes were Monsters of the Week, and some of them were like continuing like the overall plot line.
I had never watched the X-Files before, so
You never
I
watched
think
the
it
X Files?
no, not I never did when it
What?
was originally on. So I tried watching it when it got put on Netflix relatively recently, and I just bailed because I thought it was too fucking cheesy.
What I do when I watched it, I basically I skipped the Monster of the Week episodes,
Okay.
and I only
So
watched the episodes that were about like the overall story arc.
how could you tell which ones were which?
I went online and they told me
Okay.
which episodes are Monsters of the Week and which ones were like part of the overall plot.
Oh, okay.
So
So,
yeah, I
okay.
bail. I didn't watch any of the Monster of the Week. I watched some of them, but once I was getting deeper into the story, it's like, I don't want any of these Monster of the Week episodes, so I just started skipping them. Because usually those are the cheesy ones that are basically like, I don't know, Twilight Zone episodes.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, maybe I should try that too.
Yeah, so that's what I did. I just skipped those. Because I found the overall story pretty compelling and interesting.
Okay.
So I
I
was
mean
like,
the
okay,
the concept is interesting to me in fiction that you're finding alien that you're investigating aliens and UFOs and stuff. That's an interesting concept.
yeah, because there were some notable monsters of the week that I would watch, depending on if they had a special guest actor that I was interested in. So I know one of the monsters of the week that I watched was had Bruce Campbell in it. So I was like, oh, I'll watch this one.
Oh, okay. From Evil Dead.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, he was in an episode.
That's cool. Hmm.
But yeah,
So,
when then the movies are like a continuation also of that plot line.
oh, okay. Hmm. Well, so Yeah, I guess let's give our actually I guess we kind of did just a few minutes ago give our general thoughts of the Rings of Power show. Uh, yeah, I guess also just I think it certainly to me I think it's a like I said I think it's a mediocre show but worth watching. But it pales in comparison to me to even the Hobbit movies. I still maintain that, as I said before, but especially the Lord of the Rings movies, because Lord of the Rings movies they have a special place in my heart because they're so powerful and awesome and were so formative in me eventually becoming a huge fantasy nerd that they're so well done that there's still some scenes in all three movies that bring tears to my eyes every time I watch them, even though I'm pretty sure I've literally seen the whole trilogy at least 30 times. So,
Do you
yeah,
watch it every year, or
not
twice
every
a year or
year.
something?
Not every year, but I was just obsessed with Fellowship of the Ring when it first came out, so I watched it over and over and I watched the I'm pretty sure I watched the VHS of Fellowship of the Ring 27 times before I ever got the DVD and then the extended edition DVD and then the extended edition Blu-rays of all three of the movies.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to actually buy a Blu-ray player. 'Cause I don't like using my Xbox as a Blu-ray player. They can't be that expensive, right?
Your Xbox works as a Blu-ray player?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that they're doing that now. I thought that they had only done that with PlayStations before.
Well, the Xbox One is when they started using Blu-rays.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
But I don't like using my Xbox because of the button, like the eject button is broken.
Oh, okay.
And I don't want to have to open up. Well, I ended up fixing my own Xbox, so the laser on my disk drive broke. So I opened it up and replaced that. And when I did that, I messed up like the touch sensor for the whole entire touch sensor for the face button. So the power button doesn't work, and neither does the eject button.
Oh, yikes. That's not
And I
good.
bought like a new touch sensor. I just never installed it because it's just a pain in the ass. And I can get
Oh,
around
okay.
it without having to press those buttons. But if I ever have to, at least I have the part to replace it.
Oh, okay. Hmm. Okay, in terms of the Rings of Power, would you say that you like the Lord of the Rings? Well, I guess the books of course too. I like the books more than the Rings of Power show too. But would you say that you like the Lord of the Rings movies and books and the Hobbit books more than the Rings of Power show too? But you still think it's like above average, as you said?
I think it's above average. Fortunately, there's no like. I think the interesting about the Rings of Power show is there's no equivalent book that I can read because
Yeah,
a lot of it is made up.
it's loosely based on the appendices, and there's some other stuff from Silmarillion and stuff like that. But yeah, a lot of it is made up and filling in gaps in the mythology.
So I think it has that advantage where it's related to the mythos, but it doesn't have. Yeah, it seems that there are some lore busting things, possibly. I can't say for sure until this entire show is finished. Like we could
Unless,
say there's some lore busting right now, but we don't know because these things might get subverted later. There's no way to tell at this point.
yeah, well, they could reveal some stuff in other seasons before the show ends, of course, that confirms whether these uh, seeming lore breaks actually are lore breaks.
Yeah, but there are some, I guess, but some of the lore breaks that are happening that are not subvertible to me aren't that damning. Like Gandalf showing up to for me right now. to me, it doesn't matter how much whether he shows up now or later. I don't think that changes like the lore too much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're just,
And we know they had to do some timeline compression and all that. That's
yeah.
par for the
I'm
course, but
okay. I'm okay with it as long as they don't go around change stuff that's being established in the lore. Like they have Gandalf doing stuff that other characters are supposed to do, or other characters are dead that are supposed to be alive and he takes their place, or some things don't happen that are supposed to happen because he's there, or
well, what
things like
about
that.
how upset were you about Glorfindel not being in the Fellowship of the Rings?
I wasn't really bothered by that. That's just a he's only just in kind of a minor part, that one sort of minor part of Fellowship of the Ring anyway. And Arwen is a more important character too,
Yeah,
so
but they gave her magic powers.
that's
She
true.
didn't have magic powers.
Well, yeah, that's true. Also, I watched the movies before I ever read the book, so I didn't know that until
Same
after.
here. Same here. I didn't
Yeah.
care. I like to be honest, I didn't give a crap that it was different. I was like,
Yeah,
oh, the book's a little different. That's cool.
yeah. Well, and one thing that's good about the Lord of the Rings movies is that they do still stick pretty closely to the books, and some of the changes, like most of the changes, I think are minor and don't really matter, like those ones, or they actually make some improvements sometimes with, like for example, making Aragorn a bit of a more complex character and not so two-dimensional, but they don't like totally change him and take him in a different direction or anything like that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. But yeah, I'm like you. I had not read any of the books until when did I read Lord of the Rings? I think the first time I read it was like in 2006, maybe. And I'm not sure if all the movies had come out by then or not. But hmm.
I think they I don't remember. Actually, I'm going to look that up because I don't. I was thinking at first that they maybe released them the 1 year after the other, but I think they actually did have gaps of a
Well,
few
they
years
all
in
filmed
between them.
all
They
of them,
made
right?
Yeah, they made them all. They filmed them all at once, but I think there was a gap of a few years or so in between them. I'm going to look up Lord of the
The
Rings
release date.
movies release dates.
Hmm. As if I'm thinking, I had to have read The Lord of the Rings like between 2004 and 2006, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So Fellowship of the Ring. Oh, it was 1 year after the other. Fellowship of the Ring 2002, Two Towers 2003, Return of the King 2004. So yeah, all of the
Okay,
movies had come out at that point.
so it's likely I had read the books after all three movies
Yeah, I'm pretty
had
sure
come
I did
out.
too. I think the I think the first time I tried reading the books, it was like after the actually I it might have been after not all of when not all of the movies were out yet, but either way I tried them and I was still a kid, like I think I was probably around 10 or 11, so I didn't really like I couldn't get past all the old fashioned language that Tolkien uses, and I was just bothered by that writing style. I couldn't get past that at first, but when I tried them again, at least a few years later, that's when I first appreciated them a lot more.
Yeah, I think right from the get-go, I had a deep appreciation for it. And I think the only things that kind of threw me off, well, especially like in the first book, were like it seemed like half of some of these chapters were basically just describing stuff and environments,
Hmm.
you know. And then the Tom Bombadil, like I didn't get that chapter at all. Like it made zero sense to me.
It is
Uh,
confusing. As much as Tom Bombadil is a very interesting character for many reasons, one of the main ones, of course, being that he's seemingly not affected at all by the power of the One Ring. He he's only in that one part of the entire Lord of the Rings story, and he never comes back. So I understand why they took him out of the movies.
Yeah, but he save them at the White Barrow or whatever.
Yeah, he saves them from the Barrow Wights.
Yeah, and that was like it. But he seemed like a really strange character.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That would be harder to pull off with the way that Peter Jackson was doing it too, with more of a serious feel to it. And that character in particular kind of has more of a Hobbit feel to me, kind of more of like a sort of a ridiculous over the top kids character.
Hmm. Yeah, I have to
Yeah.
reread The Lord of the Rings. It's been at least a decade since I last read it, almost.
Yeah, I reread them, I think, like, I don't know, every few years or so, maybe every 5 years at least. I think I've read them at least 3 or 4 times, and I have a bunch of different editions of them because I've gotten. I think I told you before I got a free illustrated edition from one of my mom's former ministers because I used to take care of her dogs. So she would let me take some of their books for free that they were going to sell in the church garage sale, and that was one of
Hmm.
them. And I have a whole bunch of different editions of the original trilogy too, because I got some of those from my grandpa. Those are some of the books that I got uh, from my grandma when I visited her when I was a kid after my grandpa had died. So
Mm.
I like to read a different edition every time I read it. I was thinking for the next time I read it too, one thing that I haven't actually done before is read the whole trilogy as one book because Tolkien did write it to be read as one book, but the publishers convinced him to split it up into three. So I've always read each of them separately as three different books, but I've never read them all at once as one book.
I think I had a version of the book that had the Two Towers and the Return of the King in one volume.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, it was like
Oh,
super
okay.
thick. Yeah, one of the
Yeah.
main reasons I didn't like the Hobbit movies is because I didn't like the bird shit face Radagast. I just thought it was disgusting.
Yeah, that's true.
This is fucking gross, man.
Yeah,
It's like, why are you gonna have this character just like chilling with bird shit all over his face?
good question. That was one thing. Obviously, it wasn't bird shit, but with
Yeah,
the
wasn't it
Harfoot.
bird shit on his face? That white shit
No,
on the
no,
side of his face.
that's not what I mean. I was just thinking of the Harfoots in Rings of Power.
Oh,
They didn't have bird shit on their faces, but they had like branches and leaves caught in them all the time. I mean,
branches, leaves.
I get that they want to be camouflaged and camouflage themselves from the big folks, but when they're not, it's okay to pick all the leaves and shit out of your hair. That's okay. That's allowed.
Maybe she will not have it in the second season.
Maybe that'd be interesting.
That'd be cool. We'll see.
Yeah,
And this
that
I
would be
just didn't
interesting.
like bird shit face, right? I guess it's just
Yeah,
gross.
he was kind of a minor part of the Hobbit movies, though. He did do
Yeah,
some he did do some cool combat sequences too.
but I only watched those Hobbit movies once. Um, I guess I'm just gonna have to track down these extended editions and take a
Yeah,
second
the
whack at it.
I like the extended editions, like I told you about. There's some pretty cool added stuff. There's some extra combat sequences and stuff like I was telling you about.
Yeah, it's just I found the second movie kind of long and boring.
They are pretty long, but I like the extended ones, especially the third one in particular. That one's the most action packed in general, I think. And then with all the added stuff, it's a that one in particular seemed very fast paced and action packed to me, especially when I watched the extended edition.
Oh yeah, it's like a long ass fucking battle throughout
Yeah,
like half the movie.
exactly. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, I just thought the dialogue between Bilbo and Smaug was a bit long-winded in the second movie.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of long-winded in the Hobbit book too, but they definitely stretched things out more than they needed to. They didn't need to make three long-ass movies based on one short children's book. It makes more sense for each of the Lord of the Rings movies, but not to make a whole trilogy based on one children's book. So
Well,
I
look
get
at
that
this.
criticism for sure.
Look at this. The Currently the House of the Dragon season 1 is based off of like an hour's worth of the audiobook of Fire and Blood.
That's pretty stretched out too. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're stretching one short fake history book into 5 seasons or so, I think.
Yeah, so you got 1 hour of the audiobook because I re-listened to the section that covers the show, and I was like an hour into it. It's like, oh, now there's some stuff here that hasn't happened yet. So it looks like, hey, they took an hour and they stretched this out in an entire first season, which is
Yeah.
pretty ambitious. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of House of the Dragon, actually, that's a good segue for us to end it here. I think
Yeah, I
I
try
like
not to make too many comparisons between these two shows. I know as I've been watching Daniel Green's critique of The Lord of the Rings,
mhm,
Rings of Power, and he's always comparing it to House of the Dragon. I'm thinking, like, Tolkien is a black and white writer. He's not
mhm.
making super complex characters with that are super morally gray. That's not his style.
Yeah, and
You know,
it's not about political manipulations and people fucking each other over for the power of the throne of the Seven Kingdoms, which is all what, and it's not grimdark at all, of course, either.
yeah, because I still feel that regardless, the Tolkien universe is more aimed at a younger audience.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And they didn't they ramped up the maybe a little bit of the blood, but mostly with orcs in this in Rings of Power in comparison to Lord of the Rings movies, but it's still not violent and bloody and gory and brutal at all like House of the Dragon and especially
Yeah,
Game of Thrones gets sometimes. That's true. That is a good point that a lot of people who've been criticizing Rings of Power have been comparing it to House of the Dragon, and I think that's just mostly right now because they're happening at the same time, and they're both fantasy shows. But like we were just talking about, they're both totally, completely different types of fantasy too. One's just more like the literally the epitome of classic fantasy, and one is grimdark fantasy, and it's kind of more like, especially House of the Dragon is more like historical drama with some fantasy in the background.
yeah. I think, like to be honest, House of the Dragon has more of a soap opera feel to it.
Yeah, it does.
Because
I
they're
still like it.
really stressing those interpersonal relationships and
I think
conniving,
like
stealing, and all that stuff.
I like it better because I think the execution is better. I think the story is more interesting. I care more about the characters. The plot is more interesting. I think that just the execution is better. I think that's probably the one of the other reasons why people are comparing it, but or comparing the two shows. But it is true that it's not really fair to compare them to each other. I just compare them in terms of that. And in terms of that, I think it's true that the Rings of Power show has worse acting, a worse story. It's less interesting to me. It seems slower paced, even though, like you were pointing out before at one point, the House of the Dragon show is actually pretty fucking slow paced a lot of the time, also. But I don't even
Mm-hmm.
notice that in House of the Dragon because it's much more compelling to me.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyway, we'll get
Yeah.
more into specifically House of the Dragon next weekend. Ideally, everyone should check out Dusty and I hopefully Chris and I will talk about the last 3 episodes of House of the Dragon. I'm pretty sure we looked it up before and they said that there are going to be 10 episodes this season, so there are still 2 more. So I think that'll probably mean that we talk about episodes 7 to 9. Then it should be probably next week because there's probably going to be or wait, no, maybe they're, well, depending on what day it comes out, because I seem to remember actually now that they tend to come out on Sundays for me exactly. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll either talk about episodes 6 to 8 or 7 to 9. Either way, we'll talk about ideally the three of us will talk about 3 episodes of House of the Dragon next weekend. So look forward to that. And since Tristram wasn't able to join today, like I was saying, maybe in a couple weeks, the three of us could just do kind of a review of season 1 of Rings of Power because I wanted to get Tristram's thoughts on basically all the stuff that we talked about today in episodes 6 to 8 because we haven't talked with him about those episodes yet. So that should be cool. So everyone should look
And I think a
forward to
season
that.
review will be nice.
Yeah, definitely. So everyone should look forward to that. And thanks everyone for watching. And thanks for talking, Dusty. It's fun to nerd out about fantasy stuff as always. And yeah, check out, like I said, our upcoming episode on 3 episodes of House of the Dragon. Check out our other episodes with Dusty and Tristram and I talking about every other episode of Rings of Power and subscribe to the channel. Click the like button, share this everywhere. Click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Probably do at least 1 or 2 solo videos this week. Maybe do another clip from some of our podcasts, like that one I put out the other day about Ben Burgess and Thaddeus Russell disagreeing about not even talking to each other, but their different opinions about whether the so-called Putin's brain, Alexander Dugin, the Russian philosopher, is a postmodernist or a right-wing reactionary. So check out those future videos as well. And also check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description of the video as always. If you give me $10 a month, you can vote on future topics, books, and movies that I discuss both by myself and with others. And any amount other than that is greatly appreciated as well. And like I always say, always remember this. I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And always remember that the funk cures all and groove is in the heart. And Lord of the Rings in general is just awesome. And it's awesome that there actually is a Lord of the Rings show. And of course, all the movies and books are great too. And yeah, anything else? Also, of course, check out Dusty's channel, Woke Centrist. Ideally, next week, in addition to House of the Dragon, here on my channel, we should be talking about the second part of that documentary series slash reality show called the OCD Project about basically patients with OCD going to live together in a house and get some exposure therapy done on them by a world renowned psychologist. And you suggested that because I have OCD. So, yeah, it's a very interesting show. So, that should be good to check out too. And yeah, anything else you want to say before we end it there, Dusty?
Yeah, I've also acquired the audiobook by Dave Sedaris where he talks about his OCD. It's friggin' hilarious. And I'll upload that
Oh,
when I get the
cool.
chance.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah, I would love to read that. He's a good author.
And yeah, I'll be doing a couple more reviews like I did recently with Deerskin.
Right.
And you should check that out. So I'm doing a
I
little
checked
review
that out.
of the period blood monstrosity.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm gonna do another review on the first book of the Malazan series, Gardens of the
Cool.
Moon. And I'm also doing a review of this new series I started based off of the top fantasy list from 2021. It's in a series called The Ranger's Apprentice,
Okay.
and the first book is called The Ruins of Gorlan. And I'm actually glad I started this series because I'm just a sucker for wholesome fantasy content, like wholesome classic fantasy type stuff. And this definitely fits the bill. It does remind me of like Belgariad and like those other wholesome type fantasy books. Like basically the opposite of Grimdark. They're not Grimdark. They're pretty much YA, but
Like The
they're
Hobbit.
intelligently. Well, not that goofy. Like The Hobbit, I
Okay.
still find as a bit goofy,
Yeah.
but kind of like that. But this A Ranger's Apprentice is a coming of age story. So I don't know. I'm just a sucker for coming of age stories. I love them. And in this
Okay.
case, um, like we had that with the Nevernight series.
Mm-hmm. That
That
was a
was a
good
coming
one.
of age story for an assassin. So in this
Very
one, it's a
grimdark
coming of
coming of
age.
age story.
Yeah, that one's grimdark. I enjoyed that too, but
Me
this one
too.
is a coming of age story for a ranger. So I always love fantasy stories that are based off of like these playable classes that you play in these fantasy games.
Right. Right.
So
Like
like
Dungeons.
rangers, clerics, wizards, warriors, thieves, you name it. I like exploring these different character classes and how people write stories, based off of that. But yeah, I'll do a review of that as well, probably coming sometime this week.
Sweet. Yep. Check that out too on Dusty's channel, Woke Centrist. All right. Thanks again, Dusty. Thanks again, everyone, for watching. And adios until next time.
All right, you take it easy, toodaloo, motherfuckers.